It was good, y'all. It's your boy JD6 here with my man. Shout out to KC Sports Authority. Make sure y'all go check that podcast out, man.
You heard the man. Well, you can hear him on the broadcast for football with Brian Haney, also on pre and post game with Brandon McAnderson, and of course, KU basketball pre and post game as well with Sean Kellerman. He is Mr. David Lawrence, also one of my former teachers. And Mr. Lawrence, it's an honor, pleasure to have you on the podcast with me today. Appreciate you taking some time to hop on and talk some KU sports. How you doing?
I'm well, Keegan. I'm glad to see you grown up and got a big boy job and a son, and that's exciting.
Life comes at you fast as you grow up. And unfortunately for the Jayhawks, life came fast this football season as well. Unfortunately, it doesn't end the way we all hoped, going 5-7, dropping to Baylor at the end and missing a bowl game for what would have been the first time in program history, going 3 straight seasons of bowl eligibility. And really, this was a season that was really 2 different seasons. Sloppy start, recovery, great recovery, 3 straight wins over top 25 opponents, first time in NCAA history. But ultimately, the season kind of ends poorly there with just not getting off to the hot start with the season we needed to. Just dropped too many of those games early on to keep it going. But just want to get some quick thoughts from you on the season as a whole. If you could summarize how this season went in a few words or so, what comes to your mind when we reflect back on this season?
Yeah, well, 40 years of doing this, and there's never been a season like this one. So, they don't all blend together. As you mentioned, high expectation, entering into a conference with the unknown, with the transfer portal system. There was talk about us, Oklahoma State, Utah being at the very top. Schools like BYU, Arizona State, they were downtrodden teams. And of course, we know what's happened with that. And I guess that's exciting. I'm old fashioned, but, I like the fact that, there's an opportunity to turn things around. Keegan, I don't know what to tell you on what happened early. Our quarterback play wasn't as good, and we turned it over. And I guess that's all you really need to say. Then we went through a time where we had a very valuable person defensively who was a leader and also one of our leading tacklers that was banged up, and that really hurt. And, these guys are somewhat professional now with NIL, but that they're still, 20 years old. And I think it got in our heads a little, maybe a lot, offensively and defensively. And one just led to another. And then it's like at the end of the half and end of the game, we got anxious and it didn't go well. So, and that a little bit contagious from one week to the next. And then, we got things together, and then, we got our, backs up and said, you know what, we just want to prove that we were who we thought we were. And I think they were able to accomplish that. But certainly, in a game happening on Saturday, it'll be tougher probably for us to watch it because we kind of feel like we should be there in Arlington, and we are not.
Yeah, and honestly, if you take maybe 5 to 6 plays over the course of the season that go differently, we very well could be sitting here in a Big 12 championship opportunity and a college football playoff opportunity. So definitely a disappointing season as a whole. It just felt like one of those years where maybe the expectations, and I think rightfully so, were high coming into the year based on all the returners we were having and the success we've seen the last 2 years. So expectations were high, but boy, did things kind of get derailed pretty quickly against Illinois and then UNLV, and then just one after the other. Like you said, there was 1 or 2 things that as they stacked up, we just found a lot of obstacles that kind of, disappointed the way the season went. But, they did fight really hard. I think that's one thing we've seen with this Kansas football team in the Leipold era is no matter what, they are in just about every game. And even with their backs against the wall, they still find ways to fight and scrap and get back. Just unfortunately, a little too late on some of that late in the season. I know there were a lot of things that went wrong throughout the year. There were times the offense was down, then up, times the defense looked really good, really bad. times where fans, I think, were questioning some of the coaching decisions, and then other times where we're sitting here going, wow, that was a beautiful game plan. All in all, not the way we wanted to go. But I did want to ask you about this because I know, you've seen a lot of great players in your time, coached a lot of great players, seen a lot of kids come up through Lawrence in our own high school programs, but also some great kids come through the Jayhawk program. And one in particular, obviously, is going to hold a very special place in all of our hearts here in Lawrence. And that's Devin Neal, who unfortunately, wraps up his time here in a Kansas uniform. Didn't go out the way he wanted to. We spoke with him back in the spring on the podcast about senior expectations. Obviously, the big goal was to set out and get those individual personalized record goals, which he now holds. And I don't know if anyone's ever going to catch him in those again. But ultimately, the team goals didn't live up to. But I want to get your thoughts on Devin Neal, thoughts on him as a Lawrence kid, having him in the classroom. Just what does it mean to this Kansas football program and the university as a whole, athletics, to see a kid come out of Lawrence, Kansas, have the career he had and the legacy he's going to leave behind?
Well, first of all, the fact that he put a stake down and said, you know what, this is my home, and I'm going to come here, and he didn't have a lot of things to base that on. Every coach is going to tell him, we're going to be better, we're going to turn things around. So the faith that he had, in this program changing and being able to call this his home, and he grew up being a Jayhawk and kind of feeling like family exists. I mean, that means a lot. And certainly, I know his grandmother, his grandmother, librarian at Old South Junior High, and good people. So no doubt that he's surrounded by good people, and he's a man of integrity and character. He did things the right way. He didn't shortcut. He kept a level head. So credit mom and dad and family for doing that. Keeping a level head on him is something that's probably more difficult to do today than years before. But also, being a good listener and not feeling like you know it all,
Mhm.
because he got better every year.
Yeah.
I thought he got a little faster, which shows what he did in strength and conditioning. I thought his vision and his patience and you know finding the hole, patient, timing wise with the offensive line, working in concert with the offensive line, he became better. And then, you know the Colorado game, which I think was senior day, what a way to go out. um, I think he made a lot of money. I
Oh
think,
yeah.
everyone's kind of got their own idea of where he might go in the draft or his success in the NFL, which is an unbelievable league, the greatest league that there is in the world. Uh, and my feeling is he just got more prepared. He showed that he was more ready. I thought
Mhm.
it was like a highlight tape of Devin Neal through the Colorado game. I mean, he was just better than anyone on the field, and there just happened to be a couple of first rounders on the other side of the field.
I'm sure it definitely helped knowing that there were some scouts in the audience for Shedeur Sanders, but instead Shedeur played a great game in that game too. But yeah, I think Devin definitely got some more eyeballs looking his direction. He's going to be wherever he ends up in the NFL, given the right opportunity. I think he's going to seriously impress people. His just overall football IQ, his skill set, to me seems so translatable. He said coming back this year, parts of his game he wanted to get better at was the screen game, the passing screen game, a little bit more in pass pro. And not only did he do that, but we also saw him get just a little bit more effective as a runner. I mean, there are very few running backs I've seen that have just the extreme patience he has to find the hole, hit the hole hard, and keep driving. There's never, anytime there's a 3 or 4 yard loss, he finds a way to turn it into 3 or 4 yards the other direction instead. So I've been super impressed with him. Obviously, it's going to be disappointing not seeing him in a Kansas uniform moving forward. But man, it feels great as a Lawrence person myself just to see him being at the top of the program. And I guess the other question I want to ask you about him is, now the conversation is going to be, where does Devin Neal rank in all-time Kansas football players, but also just all-time former Jayhawks? He's going to have his name thrown up there with the likes of Gale Sayers for football. And I know it's hard to compare eras over decades of football, but where do you think he's going to go down as just an all-time Kansas Jayhawk?
Well, being a little bit older, I always feel like I need to have the back of all those players that, quite honestly, people that are under 50 really don't know about. I mean, for the first 100 years, you couldn't play for 4 seasons. So, numbers wise, you really can't compare. It's apples and oranges, 3 years versus 4 years. Number of games you play was 9. Um, then it became 10, 11 when I played, and now it's 12. Bowls were much easier to get to. I mean, it used to be about 8 teams in the country went to bowls. So if you got to a bowl, and when I went to a bowl, I think there was maybe, double that number of teams that went to bowls. So it was a big deal going to a bowl to get those stats added on. And offenses is certainly, when you're talking quarterback, when you talk anything about quarterbacks today, you have to just say, you can't say second best, third best, or best. You have to tack on this century, because the last century and even a little bit of the century before that, offense is different. So, just having said that, that's something I think all young people, and you sound very like a guy like you do your homework. So you know a little bit about the different eras. I mean, growing up in the 70s as a teen, and even when I was in college in the 70s and 80s, we watched KU running backs every week in the NFL. Shanklin, Miller, Sayers was well, when I was really young, and then of course Riggins. There was a guy named Ray Evans a long time ago who different kind of offense, and of course then you can start talking about the people that were able to play college football is different from today. But to your point, I mean, he's up there. It's hard to say anyone is more talented than Gale Sayers. He's kind of an elitist right there. Um, and John Riggins was so fast for being so big. And I think both of those guys would translate to today, but you can only compare them against their peers. Tony Sands, outstanding. Um, y- you know, so I think Devin is somewhere behind. Riggins was used as a fullback a lot in the league, so it's a little bit different. Um,
Yeah, that comparison's so hard because you have many decades of just straight smash mouth running up the middle football where it was, the running back's the most important position on the field. And then you go through phases where it's all right, quarterback, wide receiver. Then you get a guy like Devin who can do a little bit of both, but put up an impressive monster season. And even then, some of the numbers still don't really compare to some of what June Henley did back in the 90s. Just the game is so different, but to see it translate over time. And yeah, I think all those guys you're talking about, yeah, you line up any offensive line out there and you put that guy at running back, you're going to see something special, because that part of football to me doesn't change. And I know you obviously with your lineman background, it's cliche to say that football starts with the trenches, but how many times are games won and lost with the way the trenches go? And so you put one of those talented running backs behind any line, you're gonna watch greatness. I think as KU fans, we might not have had these seasons success over the last 25 years, we'd hope, but you've seen a lot of really high quality players come through. And I think that part of Kansas football never changes. One thing that is going to change though, going into the offseason, just a couple more things to throw at you. We're in a whole different time. NIL has completely changed the game. It's free agency of sorts. It's changed how we recruit. How often do coaches focus on the high school recruits versus the transfer freshmen, sophomore, juniors, whatever. If you had to, just pick the top 2 or 3, most important positions you think KU is going to focus on this offseason, knowing that we're losing about 30 seniors and a handful of other guys that'll end up in the portal or move locations, and there's still obviously what happens with Jalen Daniels. Does he come back? Does he transfer? Does he go pro? There's a lot of needs coming up on this team, and they already found a potential replacement for Devin Neal and LaShawn Williams coming over from Iowa. But as you look at this offseason, where do you see this program putting a lot of their attention?
You know, in answering that, I'll say that makes me feel even more comfortable that Lance Leipold and his staff are leading this program. They are so thorough and comprehensive, and now I don't think there's really limitations on staff members who can be a part of that, and they've been active, being involved in portal and potential people to transfer over. I'm confident that we're going to, I think Arizona State has the blueprint, and many other schools like that, that we can do that. But let me just throw that out there. You talked about the fact that I played offensive line and tight end. I will remind you. I think Bryce Foster and Logan Brown. Um, I would start there, and right, Logan Brown went through senior day. Bryce
Mhm.
Foster did not. Either could potentially go in the draft.
Yeah.
Um, open their pocketbooks for best offer type of deal.
Mhm.
But you get either of those guys back, and all of a sudden, anyone you put behind them is going to get better.
Yeah.
So, you got Clements, um, Kobe Baines, the Gorsica. Those guys are all potential guys that could. And if you throw in Logan Brown and Bryce Foster, we would have one of the best offensive lines. Um, you know, in at least the Big 12, if not nationwide. So, let's start there. But then you got to go to wide receiver and corner, because just
Yeah. You're
totally,
losing a lot of talent there to
yeah,
graduation.
yeah. But they're on it. They announced the signing class.
Mhm.
Um, you you can expect to get depth from those guys. And, I don't have the barometer on just how good, how great these guys are. Certainly, just looking at the talent level, it's significantly higher than what we're accustomed to in past years. But, you know, it can't be like the old Kansas days where you're counting on A, B, and C of our freshman class, coming in and immediately being a Big 12 winning type player.
Mhm.
So it's going to be portal, and hopefully those freshmen can help and give you some depth and help in special teams. But we need proven talent. um, there's just a lot of them out there, mid majors. That's where a lot of people are going. You get
Mhm.
those special guys like we have found, and for Dominic Pooney, for instance. I
Yeah.
remember that transfer situation, and everyone was talking about the transfers we got from the Big Ten, from the SEC, and didn't say a word about Dominic Pooney. And I put on his tape. I was like, oh, wow. I mean, are you kidding me? So sometimes we just tend to value SEC or Big Ten transfers, and we think automatically they're going to be the deal, but not as much Division two. Um, but that's not so fast. There's great players everywhere.
Yeah, props to the Kansas scouting guys, because that guy's also one of the best right guards in the NFL right now as a rookie, graded very high. Yeah, and the KU
Yeah.
offensive line this year, I think all 5 of them graded top 50 at their position across college football, with 3 of them being top 7, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, one of the best offensive lines, which was also concerned knowing that Scott Fuchs is moving on. But yeah, lot of holes in this offseason to go after, and I'm sure we could sit here for hours and talk about guys that they could go target, what we need to look forward to. And so maybe throughout the offseason, we could do some more of that, because I'd like to get you on some more. But last thing I want to leave you with, because I know you're prepping for basketball later, um, do the Hawks on the court have what it takes to cut down the nets this year?
Well, no question about that. It's a different animal because I guess it's not anymore as far as playoffs in football. But it's usually, I always say it's all about your second round,
Yeah.
because if you're a Kansas team, you get the 1 seed, and everyone in the gym cheers against you in the second round. You're going to get a team that may have been A, underseeded, um, getting hot in March, and you got all the pressure of the world on you. So if I ever wrote a story on basketball, particularly Kansas, I'd say it's all about the second round. But this team is going to be challenged throughout, playing in a tougher than ever Big 12
Mm,
conference, and I think that's a great thing. They're going to face those talented regional finals type of matchups throughout, and of course, uh, Bill is the best.
yeah.
Maybe 15 years ago people would say prove it. I don't think we have to prove it anymore. He's the best, and he doesn't have the things hanging over his head that he used to, that probably caused him some
Mhm.
difficulty in recruiting. um, we're solid everywhere. I'm a big Juan Harris guy. I love Zeke and all the transfers that have come in. KJ gives you something that nobody else really has, a KJ type of guy, and
Yeah.
he proved in the game on Saturday that he can be an elite guy with stats as well. It's going to come down to health, and you got to find a way to peak. But when you have more players, you've got backups. You're not depending, so you got a what if um, Hunter Dickinson sprains an ankle or gets in foul trouble, and he only can play 13 minutes. Well, Bedunga has shown that he can play and deliver um, as well as anyone on a given day. And who knows what Flory's going to be in March, because it's not going to be worse. It's probably going to be better. So it's exciting. We're deep. It's kind of like those Bill Self teams that would win the conference every year. And I think this year's team in this conference is probably going to be more tournament ready than we were 15 years ago. Not that we didn't always have quality teams in the Big 12, but not as many as we do now. And so it's going to be exciting and fun, and it's a long ride. um, I always say that it's very difficult in March to remember who we played in November, but it has been a special November for Kansas basketball,
Yeah.
and we've seen great teams. And you know part of me doesn't like facing them and beating them in November, because then they have that revenge thought
Yep.
going
And
on
you
in
you know
March.
they're going to get better by then too. Yeah, that's what I
Uh,
love. We talked about last week on one of our episodes. We love that college basketball's taken all these big time marquee matchup games at the beginning of the season, and Bill Self's been doing that for years now. And I think the rest of the league's catching up. But yeah, he's got one of the deepest, toughest schedules year in and year out, and you know that makes a team better when it comes crunch time later in the year. But yeah, let's get you out in there on that. I appreciate taking the time. Would love to have you on some more of the off season, talk some more football, and just get some of your stories from over the years. I know you got plenty there to share with. But he's David Lawrence. Appreciate you coming on, and we'll do this again sometime.
Keegan, it was a pleasure. Good
Thank
to
you.
talk.